Welcome. I'm Kinetic Symphony. I hunt down and report on weird and true mysterious stories, from glitches to the paranormal. Would you like even more content? Here's my Patreon. Now onto the stories. Case file number 1336, written by Not a Deer. My grandfather's final gift, the guiding light. Couple years ago, my grandfather died and was buried with the ashes of his much-beloved Chihuahua. They died about a month apart. Dog was 17 years old and went shortly after we had to move my granddad into a care facility. Not long after, my mom started seeing a little fist-sized ball of light bobbing by the floor and zipping down the hallway, then vanishing down into the floor. My mom is the most skeptical woman I've ever met. You could not force her to admit ghosts may be real, but she saw this little light. Then her dog started seeing it. She'd jump up from a dead sleep and start barking and howling like crazy at the exact path the little light would always take, then go nose at the spot where it would vanish to. Then my dad saw it, accompanied by, he said, the sound of nails clicking on their hardwood floor. One night, my mom wakes up and this light is at the bottom of her bed. She jolts awake, scares Dad, and then she said her mind was filled with an image of her dad laughing. "Ha! You're scared of me and Jackie." Jackie being his dog. The light faded. My mom had taken the death really hard, and she felt at peace after that. Never saw it again until I had just moved with my husband into our new house. We'd been looking to get a dog, but hadn't seen one that struck us yet. I was talking with my grandpa, and he handed me a little apricot-colored bully mix puppy. My mom calls the next day. She saw the weird little light again, the night before. I tell my husband about it, and we all kind of just shrug it off. Until 2 days later, his coworker says a friend is having to rehome a pit bull chihuahua mixed puppy, and weren't we looking for a dog? Case notes file 1336. A grandfather's final gift, the guiding light. Sounds like your granddad had a solid sense of humor, making light of unfortunate situations like death, which of course we know one way or another is not the finality most people think it is. But, that's still brilliant. More for your sake than his. If I go, and some part of me lingers behind as a spirit, that's what I'd try to do. Infuse a bit of positivity, hope, humor, however I could. Wonder if your granddad was somehow able to nudge the friend of your husband's coworker along? Maybe if it wasn't the best home for this puppy, and the confluence of events is so exceptionally unlikely on their own, that they had to be introduced as a dream, so you would accept it more readily, or maybe know it was from him. It's not wrong to want some credit for helping your family. I can understand wanting that. Bonus file written by Angry Clam 1313. The Haunting of Nikita's Martini Bar. I used to work in a small martini bar that was part of a long group of buildings. Think residential row houses. They all shared a basement, which was segregated by 2x4s and chicken wire. I had to go downstairs to get some supplies for the night shift. Me being the explorer, decided to take a walk along the length of the basement. It was about 3/4 to the end when I felt something looking at me. I turned to my left, and there was a young man, maybe late teens, early 20s. He was hanging from one of the rafters with something around his neck. He was staring at me. He had so much hate and contempt in his eyes. I froze on the spot for about 30 seconds, ran back upstairs to the bar. There were a couple of regulars there and asked me what was wrong, as my face was white and I was drenched with sweat. Before I had a chance to say anything, they said, "Oh, I guess you saw him." I'll add some more details. This was Nikita's Martini Bar on Rice Howard Way in Edmonton, Alberta, Canada. This occurred about 20 years ago. After that, I went back down into the basement. I didn't ask any of the regulars because I honestly couldn't wrap my head around what I just saw. If I could go back in time, I absolutely would have inquired more. Maybe I just didn't want to know. I believe this row of buildings is still there. There has been a lot of development around the area, so I'm not sure if the spirit has moved on or not. When I say development, I mean for roads torn down to nothing and LRT lines put in, buildings demolished for high-rises to go up. These buildings are very close to the arts district. The theater, museum, symphony. There was a restaurant at the end of this row of buildings that was very popular with theater goers. Maybe if any of them are on site, they might have more information. Case notes for the bonus file. The haunting of Nikita's Martini bar. Sadness, pondering on how brutal life was deep in our past for our ancestors. Wherever you go, people were so overwhelmed. In many cases, too much so to continue. I think people often have a rosy outlook on the lives of our ancestors, but even just going back a century, daily life was brutal. So many of the spirits from that era might not be angry, but still carry that negative, crushing weight with them wherever they go. Again, repeating the pattern. And in this case, it's not always a positive one. And sometimes it's more about how they went out, more than how they lived. I think we should take that knowledge, that somber note, and try to make sure our lives, the legacy of our lives, is extremely positive. That's the best thing we can do. Bonus file written by nillaisthewhitenword, When Darkness Beckoned. When I was around 8 or 9 years old, it was the first time my parents let me stay home alone since they were out doing something, dinner or something of that sort. I can't remember exactly. It was around 10 to 10:30 p.m., I would say, as it was very dark outside. I heard some weird scratching and whispering sounds coming from downstairs. My room was on the top floor, and I was starting to get a little antsy. I opened my door and exited my room. The scratching was getting louder, and whispering was getting more intense. For whatever reason, just about every light in the house was turned off, so when I exited my room, it was pretty much pitch black in the hallway, aside from the light coming from my room. I went out into the hallway and flipped on the switch. The light turned on, and the scratching and whispering noises suddenly just stopped altogether. I looked down the stairs and I saw a hand and arm curve around the corner leading into the living room, and it started to make a sort of come hither motion with its finger. Keep in mind, this hand was incredibly disproportionate to what a normal human hand should look like. The fingers were way too long and the nails were massive. The entire situation was just wrong, and I was absolutely terrified. I just ran back into my room and hid in the closet for the next half hour until my parents got home. When they arrived, they called me back down, and I was incredibly disturbed to find numerous tiny scratch marks etched into the ceiling and walls right beneath my room. I asked my parents if they had been home for a while, and of course they said they hadn't. I tried to explain what happened, but I doubt that they believed me at all. I still get a weird and deeply disturbed feeling when I approach the stairs, which is an odd fear to say the least. This is easily the strangest thing I've ever experienced, and it still doesn't make sense to me thinking about it now. Case notes for the bonus file, When Darkness Beckoned. Going much beyond being a spirit here, or a multiverse crossover, the creepy long fingers and the nails is a horror trope, but perhaps there's a good reason for that, beyond the universally accepted creepy factor. I think the roots of most of our horror stems from real-life encounters that people deep in the past, and sometimes even to this day, have. And those stories, they evolve into myths and legends, and they carry a lot of weight in how people to this day write horror stories or movies and so on. But that doesn't mean that those events don't really happen to some extent. You know, the myth may be altered, and it's like when you're playing that phone game as a kid, you know, where you have to pass a message to someone next to you and they go all the way around a circle. Eventually, when it gets back to you, you might have said hamburgers and they come back with beets, you know, something that doesn't fit. How possibly could it have been so distorted? But over the generations, that can apply. And now time for the quote of the day. A bird does not sing because it has an answer. It sings because it has a song. Chinese proverb. Isn't this a beautiful way to think about life? You don't do what you do because you have an answer for the world necessarily, or a solution. You just are who you are and go out in the world and be who you are. Unabashedly so is the word. If people like it, great. You're not there to solve the world's problems. If you do happen to, if that's your inner purpose, your song, then fantastic. People carry this weight on them. And there's a great, especially these days, where we're not directly involved with the earth, with our own lives, our own survival, so we lack purpose. And so people try to MacGyver up purpose, but I don't think that works. It has to be innate to you. You have to find your song, and then you'll have your purpose. Like the video, subscribe, hit the bell. Kinetic Symphony signing off.